Set Tactical here, and in spending some time with Guy here and discussing some of the setbacks that he's had and some other things going on with the steel issues, we kind of came to a conclusion that there's some things that he wanted to talk about and a piece of this puzzle here that he wanted to kind of verbalize and break down for you guys today. So I think it's important, to do that.
I'm going to say right now I'm not comfortable with any of this. I'm blowing up a really old relationship, and I don't want to be talking about this, but I've been minimizing some things and they need said. And while I'm not comfortable about it, we need to talk about this because I've come back to Pennsylvania to improve relationships, to learn more. It started with manufacturing. When we decided to become a manufacturer, you need to become a student of those things. But coming back here, I've been learning a lot more about metallurgy, heat treating, the practices within that, and as part of that, I've learned too much, and now I can see something over the last few years that is not sitting well with me. So we got to talk about it. So we're going to start off with the Crew Forge V, the GSO 12s, and then the Magna Cut, and then we'll look back over all of that, where with the benefit of hindsight and gaining all this experience as our own manufacturing company, I can see a pattern now. And by taking some tours up to Peter's Heat Treat, I don't want to, but we got to talk about it. So jumping right into it here, we are going to look at the Crew Forge V. This was supposed to be our comeback run. Some of you saw in the Crew Forge V video, we had a whole bunch of parts in Crew Forge V. It was 18 sheets of parts, and that went horribly, horribly wrong. But coming back to Pennsylvania here, with the benefit of learning a lot, we realized that this could have been handled differently. And again, if I'm stumbling a little bit, I just don't want to be talking about this. But back a few years ago, we had done some Crew Forge V. We sent the parts out as a customer of Peter's Heat Treating, and the parts came back hopelessly mangled. We'll probably build a close-up shot in here at some point, just to show how much these parts aren't matching up. I've got them pinned together, but there's a lot of not matching here. These parts either, frowned or smiled, and while Peter's was able to hold them flat, the profiles all moved, and I believe it's partially due to, I've learned a lot during the Magna Cut debacle there. Partially it's due to the handling practices up at Niagara, where it's a one-size-fits-all template for all the materials. All the materials are rolled and annealed the same way. There's mixed batches, and so I with the benefit of hindsight, I see that that's suboptimal. But on the other side of it, looking at how Peters approaches heat treat, I don't think they're always doing the most correct thing with all of the materials to ensure the best result for their customers. And up until recently, I was just a customer of a larger company. It's supposed to be a professional service provider. And looking at this now, we did some experiments as I learned more. Thankfully, Trevor, he was a great guy, or is a great guy. He's not dead or anything, but we did a full anneal on some of these virgin parts that we still had and machined them and then ran them through heat treating. And these came out phenomenal. So we did some samples and we had no warpage. The grinds turned out really even. Everything is really uniform because we properly prepared the material pre-hardening to make up for any possible deficiencies in the processing. So I had to learn that and then convey that information to Peter's Heat Treat. We annealed these under a vacuum and then processed them, and they were heat treated in a more appropriate manner, so none of this part movement happened. But looking back a few years, this cost us a few months of machining time. This was supposed to be our first big comeback as our own manufacturing company. We lost a few months of machining time and over $200,000 of income potential. I mean, just what's left that I'm holding on to. You can see here I'm trying to figure out if I can cut new profiles. Since we've already got jimping, all these machine features, it's very, very difficult to try and carve some new shape out of this that still is functional and is a viable design. And we're going to put a lot more time into just trying to save these materials. But there's over 350 of these still sitting over here a few years later. So we've got all this sunk cost in this, but the parts got mangled just, I believe, due to improper preparation, improper handling, in processing, and due to their blanket get out of jail free statement on their website, it just is what it is, and I've got no recourse. It's, if it goes right, it's their fault, and if it goes wrong, it's your fault. So that's kind of shitty. So looking at this, you want to say something?
Let's bring the camera closer so
All right.
we can show
let's
them
do
a little
that.
overhead.
Yep. All right, so John pulled the camera in here a little bit closer, but I've gotten these pinned, and I can show you here. This is really difficult to have any machining files and stuff to finish these out, because these parts moved this much. Some of these parts moved as much as a 1/4 inch one way or the other. So it's really hard in our production environment to create a uniform standard. What we tried to do was hard mill it down. That didn't really work. We can't hold good finishes with this high Rockwell steel, and just trying to do hard milling. And then you're trying to, redo jimping and things like that to make it look uniform. And it's been impossible to create a uniform standard. If you look back through our old CrewForge V feedback videos, you can see we tried several different things to address this issue, but we're gonna put 3 to 5 times as much time in this just to try and salvage these materials. So we had about 150 of these Vendetta 5.5s left that were still virgin material, and what we ended up doing, understanding better after the interaction with Niagara and Crucible and how their processing is, I had a pretty good idea what was going on with the material strain. There's just not enough alloy in this material to arrest the motion during a quench. So if there's grain stress in here, it's just going to bow around. So I can see that most of them were bowed one way, and then the parts that were nested another way bowed the other way. So it's consistent, but the opposite way.
So you have, like, when I turn some of these pieces over, right, and you have some pretty serious pitting in here.
So these were cut out on Millet's water jet,
Okay.
which had a lot of feeding issues.
Okay.
So some of this, yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was part of the issue.
That's one
or
of the
not.
reasons where we cut over size. So these are about 60 thousandths over their profile size.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had a lot of feeding issues with that old Flow water jet. So we did have some loss just related to stuff like that where it didn't clean up.
Right.
With our new one, we don't have that issue.
And guys, it's one of those things, sometimes I say to Guy, for somebody looking at something in essentially dummy terms, right? You take a stack of pieces of media like this, and he pins these handles to keep the profile exactly similar on the hand, as far as the handle design where the holes are punched.
Yeah, because they're just smiling or frowning, really.
And you see how, if you really look at how seriously tight the making of the kydex, the making of the handle scales, everything is going to be in the end process.
When you look at our edge uniformity, our panel uniformity side to side, like, you
Right.
can't hold our standards. You're going to dumb our standards down dramatically trying to do something with it.
Well, and potentially, if you guys look at something like this, on 15 knives it might be different, but when you're looking at potentially 200 pieces of material like this, every knife is going to have to be, changed in some way to make it fit. So you're going to have like a different knife for each, bar stock.
Yeah, everyone's different, and you're going to put like $500 worth of effort into trying to make a $300 knife.
Right, and that's where I'm really, coming out here, it really gave me a chance to really see what's actually going on as opposed to just watching your original YouTube videos explaining.
Yeah, and I was thankful for you to just come in and have a different perspective, because I can see it how I see it, but I don't know how another person is going to perceive what I'm saying.
Right.
So what we did with the virgin parts is we annealed them, and that went really well. So we ran some samples here. These turned out great, and I know that because all of our machining is exactly how it should be. These move through production really nicely here, and our little machining features turned out exactly the same. You can pin these together. The profiles are exactly the same. Yeah. So we did the appropriate prep work ahead of hardening to handle anything that was going on with the parts from the mill.
Right.
And that's where I struggle when I look at a company like Peter's Heat Treat. They're supposed to be an industry leader in this. And to my mind, I'm not going to tell another person how to run their business, but you should from time to time have a material science expert come in, or a metallurgist with a lot of experience in manufacturing, to understand other people's manufacturing methods and how to provide your customer with the best service.
Right.
and know that your equipment and your handling practices match your goals. If you're saying you're doing the best, these types of things you should know up front and be able to guide your customers who may or may not understand all the manufacturing aspects. A lot of people just make knives.
Well, and I think one of the big parts of this that's difficult sometimes is, like, for me, being a knife collector and knife enthusiast, knife buyer, knife tester, whatever you want to label me as with my small channel, when I hear that a company is using Pete's heat treat for the treatment of their steel, I already assume that means it's going to be top tier.
Yeah.
Which it usually is.
And a lot of times it is.
And that,
yeah.
so this isn't like a slam Pete's heat treat video, but it's just showing, you know, for such a industry leading, you know, heat treatment and steel treatment place, to have this issue be dropped on your you know, kind of lap here, it's really an alarming situation to have to go through as a manufacturer, I'm sure.
So it is.
Yeah.
So if I'll jump into this, does this fit in frame here?
Yeah. You're
All
good.
right. So all right, hang fast here, guys. So this is going to come back to, you know, since I saw it with the Magna Cut now and understood what happened with the Magna Cut, we got to talk about the 12s. You can see here these are not flat.
So guys, just a pre-statement here. This is a piece of aluminum that is milled flat.
Yeah. So this was all decked down. It was in our mill, but we changed how we're fixturing and laying things out. This gave us flexibility to swap our Pearsons around to a manual vise to a few different situations. So this was all decked flat. This is a flat plate out of our mill.
I just want to make that clear before you.
No, that's fair, man.
Showed the bowing.
So what I understand now with the benefit of hindsight is with these GSO-12s, they were not handled the best they could have been. I'm not going to say incorrectly, but we had these annealed, and they were done in an open air, like an atmospheric furnace, a non-vacuum furnace. And I can see now, since we had it in an extreme example with the Magna Cut, I can see these GSO-12s experienced a light decarburizing. That's confirmed by, I had a metallurgist friend reach out to Peter's Heat Treating, and they were about to do the same thing, re-annealing some parts to get them flat. So again, I ground these down really nice, got through all of this stuff, and they were about to put them back into an atmospheric furnace again, which
for a second time, right?
For a second time. So I can already see there's decarburizing on the spine, and we have this extreme bowing, again, because I believe there's not some carbon in some areas, and I believe there may have been some fixturing inconsistencies that exacerbated this even further, to where when these were hardened, there's not carbon in areas, and they bowed. So we've got this massive amount of bowing in some of these parts. Fortunately, we found another heat treater. We're going to anneal these in a vacuum and reharden them correctly. But you know, this is part of the struggles, and I'm only seeing it now that we've learned all of these lessons along the way, and I can see the visual examples and have the experience to know what's been going on.
Right.
As I cut through this, there's this weird little, you know, pithiness as I'm breaking
And it
down.
gives you some insight into prior projects that you had some funny things happen with as well.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, and this, again, we were still not learning up there, and they're continuing to do the same thing.
Right.
And that's alarming to me, because this shouldn't be. These types of steels, I understand now the nuts and bolts up there of what exactly needs to happen in that environment, and they're just doing what's easier for their workflow versus what's easier, you know, or better for their customer. You know, and if it's more expensive, you should outline that, and like these are the things that
Price
could
will
happen.
vary from, you know,
Yeah,
processes.
like if
that
you need
done.
this, we can ensure this result, but this is the cost and this is the lead time on that, where, you know, it's just they're not diving into that, but then they're not transparent about what's actually going on in there. And if you get a negative outcome, that's on you.
Right.
If it's great, you're happy, they're happy to hear that. But, you know, you might get fired if you've got some negative feedback.
So guys, I think a large part of the video prompting to shoot this video was when I look at you know, you have let's say 10,000 people that watch an explanation video of some issues that guy's dealing with his steels, you know, steel plate knife layouts, you know, knife cutouts that he's dealing with, and he goes on and tries to explain it. You know, there's only going to be a very small percentage of people that understand kind of what's going on and what he's really had to chew on over the past 18 months or so. So we kind of were talking and thought it was a great time to maybe do a little more layman's terms, overall explanation of it. So that's some of what we're trying to do today.
So then,
you can really see it there.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a low temper. You don't have the high temper patina there. So the Magna Cut now, and I'm gonna say this is I am gonna pull my video down for the decarburizing. I was a little too critical of Niagara and Crucible's portion of this. I will say we've got the lab results back, like the initial reporting back. On the other issues, I'm seeing the anomalies within the parts, and that's a whole separate situation. So don't let that detract from that. There's some soft anomalous pockets within the material that we're not doing, and they're still trying to figure out exactly what that is. So with that being said, I did come at Crucible and Niagara over this decarb because the data sheet does not specifically talk about needing to anneal in a vacuum furnace, which I do still think that should be said because of how sensitive this is to this situation.
Right.
But now coming back, I'm learning none of this should be annealed or stress relieved in the type of situation. So I think at the time, the folks at Peters, preyed on my ignorance of their specific practices up there a bit and garnered my favor in having a different opinion of this. But if you grab one of those parts over there one of those, yep. This is one of the first runs, and that doesn't look like that. So somewhere in between, they had decided to try and stress relieve, and they did this in the wrong piece of equipment. But I had a first run; they were really clean.
Right.
There was a little material strain, but I handled that differently. And then there was this run that we had a very negative outcome of 850 couple parts. And then after that, you can grab one of those parts up there, where they admitted, that was probably shouldn't have done that. And then we're back to the good result again. So in between here, all these parts got decarburized, but now it's their official position that they did nothing wrong. And, I should have allowed more cleanup. But, what about the profiles? What am I supposed to do? Am I taking the whole part and making it a new part?
Right.
So again, I think that's just trying to skirt liability and hoping that I don't have the ability to sue your insurance company or sue you directly, and just to get out of doing what's right. This ruined our production and ruined all of our Dutch bushcraft knives 5.1s and all these other knives people were waiting on. And while we figured this out with them and the steel company, this is 2.5 months of work of our whole shop, and then another 2 months of trying to figure this out with the steel company,
right,
where I believe they knew what they were doing. And, we had to come through this whole investigation to figure this out. And then finally they said, maybe Laren Thomas is saying we shouldn't do that. But,
right.
That it's messed up. So, I don't know where to go from here, John. I'm just trying to explain this in a way. This very visual way helped me understand what had gone on a few years prior.
Yeah, it's very, to the plain untrained eye, it's very, very clear. There's
now you can see it. It's common. It's just I didn't know what they were doing back then,
right,
and why these were warping up so bad, and why these are so difficult to get finished out, because they don't want to be straight. And now that we've got that decarb layer off of most of these parts, if we anneal them in a vacuum furnace, then they're going to be okay. We can straighten them out, do a stress relieve, reharden them, they'll be great.
Right.
But to a certain extent, the profiles move because they're so big.
Right.
It's just not as bad as the Crew Forge. So I know what's going on now. It's just I don't have a paper trail because I was just a customer asking for a result.
Right, and it's one of those scenarios where you may be a large consumer, but you're still the consumer, and they are still the company providing the service. So I think a lot of people don't understand. It's not like you have an enormous publicly traded company with a team of lawyers to fall back on
and metallurgists
to go through a scenario like this successfully. You know what I mean? You were waking up every day and trying to get some stuff done with half your mind on how am I going to handle these other issues and deal with the legality of it. Do I press? Do I wait? Do I see what they're going to do? It's a very stressful situation to go through.
Yeah, and I've learned I've needed to be everything here. So we started off as a design house, and then design and finishing, and then when things didn't work out with Millet, we're design, finishing, machining, you know,
Right.
so now I'm coming back here to figure out what's been going on and how to tighten that up. But, you know, when I asked for their insurance company's information, I got fired. So
Right.
thankfully, we do have in the immediate a much better heat treater with more advanced equipment, tighter practices. They're really used to knives, but then they have really new superior equipment. So we're going to be able to get at least as good a result as our best work from Peters, and I believe even better.
Right.
Because they have different goals and they deal with a different clientele. So
and that's what I always tell everybody, man. If you think, you know, you have so many more leaps and bounds and strides to take in this industry as far as some of the stuff that you know you have mulling around with, ideas that are coming up and things that you want to do. So it's
there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts.
You're not
man.
just putting handles on knives, you know,
Right.
and that's, you know, there's something happened there, you know, but they're saying it's the same now, you know, that it was the same service every time, where demonstrably one went terrible, and you can hear me screaming my face off in those internal memos.
Right.
But nobody wanted to be liable for it.
Right. Just trying to kind of shift what happened, hoping it wasn't kind of what it is.
Exactly.
And then there was some issues with the process on that.
Yeah, so this is
Media
back
as
to,
well.
you know, just back to rolling standards. I lost about 80 of these, the first run 4.5 bushcrafts in CPM 3V, and I think there's a materials inconsistencies video I think I released a while back where Millet had mostly ground these, but due to the irregular surface on the one side, this is okay. I'm used to seeing this, but this was 145, 146. It was supposed to be able to clean up at 125, an 1/8 inch. We took these to 0.115, a little thinner, but due to how mashed potatoey, I don't know if that's in the frame there, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay. How irregular this surface was, we had a ton of these, even at 115, still kind of making a left-hand turn. And since there wasn't carbon, we hadn't quite gotten through the decarb surface. They wouldn't straighten for anything. And since they were already bevel ground, there's nothing to do. You've got to take another 10 thou off one side, so you have like a weird asymmetric grind.
Right.
Then the edge is off center. So, you know, things like this just happen, and you live and learn. You know, you think you're visually through it until you get into finishing and you realize, like, damn, that's not going to be okay.
Right.
You know, but that's a lot of lost income. You know, and I add these things up where I've lost years of productivity with these 12s, trying to work through it, not understanding what's happening, and then, you know, almost $250,000 in lost income, plus my time, plus all the materials of the Crew Forge V. Things like this are happening, and then, you know, you've got these soft pockets in some of this Magna Cut as you're going along the way, and then losing, you know, it was $100,000 of lost income on the back end of this production of the Magna Cut. So, you know, leading up to our move, we were trying to bail ourselves out from this issue. So we had a bunch more sunk cost into these. None of the stuff's appropriate for our production that we were doing for people, and it's all crippling.
Right.
So we've just been struggling to handle all of this and digest it. But now I've, you know, like we were talking about it yesterday, I'm like, damn, I really need to talk about this, because there's a course of conduct here, and I'm seeing the pattern now. There's some commonality.
Well, and guys, one of the big things about this is, you know, if you're in a scenario where you're working with a powdered stainless steel product of like this metal, you know, this stainless steel, very high-end powdered steel, and you're being essentially told that you're going to have to be okay with a loss margin of 18 to 25% somewhere in there.
Yeah.
This is such a precise steel where you would think that
It should be.
it would relay into, you know, each sheet coming out the same. You know what I mean? Or at least accurate as far as the particle components inside of these pieces of metal.
When the sheets come out of a bigger bar.
Right.
So that bar should be homogeneous, and when you know, cut chunks off and make sheets, that should be homogeneous. So you're telling me there's an expected defect rate that seems insane to me.
Right.
You know, and other steel companies, they would take the sheet back.
Right.
Like, oh man, there's some parts in there, so there's probably something else going on in there. So they'll take that back, comp you a little bit for your work, and just take all the materials back, give you new materials.
Right.
You know, this like onesie twosie, what do you see? It's like, well, do I need a micro CT scanner in here to scan all my
and
sheets?
we're not dealing with wood that's cut out of a forest that is very porous and affected by moisture, that's coming in big planks. We're dealing with a specifically manufactured, precise essentially one of the most high-end powdered stainless
It
steels.
should be
in
the
world.
most uniform steel on the market.
So expecting to potentially lose, 2 out of 10 pieces, or 1.5 out of 10 pieces, or in dollar amounts, a $20,000 out of $100,000 order. That's just crazy.
And early on in production, it sucks to see something, but as it gets further and further along, you have more and more cost in it.
Right.
If I see it at profile machining, I've already done rough grinding, and then profile machining, you're like, damn it.
Right.
But then if it gets to finishing, as I've already cut through
You've
a bevel,
already got handles. You've already done the work for the bevels.
Yeah, like I'm preparing to have a finished knife.
Right.
So I've got like 99% of the cost in it to find out, there's a defect in it that's potentially going to compromise it. And that leads me to wonder, like, what's going on that I can't see in the part. It's disturbing.
And it's one of those things where it would be the K steels and all the Bowler and Udahome stuff is excellent. The K steels and the LMAX, and I've always had really good results with that, with like my TRC and some other good companies that do good heat treats on the steels. But it's a shame to think that you would, almost not trust stuff coming from a CPM product or a Magna Cut. It's a shame because, dude, a lot of your older models that I fell in love with, they were big time 3V. You were like a 3V guy,
I was a true believer for a long time, and then I learned too much, and they're not a huge fan of that.
Right. So guys, we're gonna back this camera up and kind of finish up with the video. Thanks for stopping in. Just give us a sec here. Let me set some things back right. So guys, I wanted to step the camera back a little bit and kind of move to a different segment. I spending time up here in the shop with Guy, talking about all these things, just kind of wrapping my head around all of it. I'm literally physically walking around pallets of these pieces of material and this media that he has had squandered and has had messed up by some of this incorrect process.
It's obvious when you see it,
right? And I didn't really understand that, like, these aren't things waiting to hit the table. These are piles and piles of things that were essentially kicked out from under him. You know what I mean? So I wanted to just kind of go around and show you guys a little bit of this. So I'm going to pick the camera up. We're going to kind of follow Guy and check some of this stuff out.
Yeah, and I'm not going to like win everybody over with this, but I think just having more and more people come in, there's a commonality here where they see it, and you having an interest in talking about this gives me the fortitude to talk about this, because this is uncomfortable for me. But
and guys, having prior pre-orders, you know what I mean? One thing that's funny is, like, everybody was like, oh, well, if I had Survive sending me knives to test, it'd be a different story. They would say that to me up until a couple weeks ago. And I would try to say to them in the comments, like, you and I have never met until like a week and a half ago.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Sean's, yeah.
Right. And so it's all the knives I had from him I bought, they were in stock, and that 15 ships within 15-day thing on their website. If you buy an in stock order, I always got it within 7 to 10 days of ordering it, if it's an in stock thing. So all my orders were in stock.
Well, then some of these other issues just suck the energy, and I've got to keep the lights on. So
well, and that's what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm somebody that before learning about all this and seeing your videos that were alarming about the processes and the steels, I'm somebody that had pre-orders with Survive in the bank already that I already had. So living within an hour and a half drive, it's worth it to come up and being somebody that's a knife enthusiast anyway, it's worth it to come up and see what's really happening in a manner that's different than just seeing some of your videos about the issue at whole. You know what I mean? Actually seeing it in person and discussing some of the things that are going on.
Yeah, you've seen every square foot of my shop now.
Right.
And it's obvious if you can come in here, and that's where I have an open door policy. I don't want to hide anything from anybody.
Right.
So
yeah, let's look at some of the materials.
Let's do it.
So guys, we're gonna take a walk over here. And you want to talk about the 12s and the 5.1s there?
Yeah, these 5.1s in Crew Forge, I still have like some hope that I can peel some new shape out of the old shape. But this was just with these, I threw away 4.7s and 4.5s and 4s just because they were too small, and the smaller they were, the worse they warped. And they look like potato chips. There was nothing new to do out of those, so we left them back in Idaho. But just what is here, I have a little over 350 parts, and that is over $100,000 of lost income. That's my ability to hire people, to get new equipment, to invest in materials. That's our mobility as a company.
Right.
And when things like this happen, if somebody is reckless with our materials as a professional in their industry, that's how that affects us. Looking at these 12s, now that I understand that these were decarburized and, handled not as correctly as they could have been, these big parts are insanely expensive. So when they're moving around, they make my life harder. And knowing that they're not going to want to flatten, where I've got to reprocess the ones over here in the bin, I've still, without the issues, I paid Millet a lot of money to make these, and now I'm making them.
Right.
So you're getting I'm paying you to take these now.
Right.
Where, we just chalked up our different machine and finish times. Each one of these, I still have about an hour and a half to get these from where they are to where they need to be to deliver. An hour and a half a piece.
And that's not even including Millet's time with them.
No.
Right.
And that's, that's handling the flattening and everything, and re-annealing and doing all this stuff again to make sure they're where they need to be for you guys. But just the processes in here, if these were perfect, I have an hour and a half a piece in these, each one, to just make them leave. And that's my time. That's our shop time. So I've got to keep the lights on. When you guys see me selling EDC4s and stuff, that's my liquidity to invest in new materials, to absorb these things, to get new Magna Cut, to invest in other things, to divert for people that don't want Magna Cut. This is all insane, and I already didn't want to be a manufacturing company.
Well, and guys, not to interject here, but the part of it that is so baffling is when you look at the size of your actual company. It's crazy that all of this is landing on you, and you're not having, let me cover 80% of this, let me cover 30% of this, let me take care of half of it because it was half our mistake or whatever. You know what I mean? These are not things that
not even making us whole on the materials.
Right, and you're not. You know what I mean? You proved the stuff with the soda can and your finishing processes and some other videos.
Yep.
And it's like, for everything you guys are seeing here, and this is not everything right here.
Well, then running samples of different ways of doing it. Like, we figured out what the issue was because we addressed it by changing the processes.
Right.
But then I get cut off at the knees when I'm like, hey, well, you guys messed this up. Make it right. And
Right.
I'm like, well, okay, you're fired. Like, oh, sweet. Okay.
But and what I'm fumbling with my words to say is you didn't do this. You know what I mean? It wasn't your actions or your processes that caused the malfunctions in these parts.
But it's still my responsibility because
Right.
I owe you a thing.
Right.
And I'm gonna do the thing. It's just some of these are insanely time consuming.
Right.
So, Mike's not gonna show up if he's not getting paid. The machines need power. I need to pay my rent.
Right.
So I'm committed to this, but I had to pick this all up and learn it where other people didn't do it right.
Right.
And now I'm getting into metallurgy and figuring out all that stuff, and I learned too much about these companies, and we're not friends anymore.
Right.
So as I know more, I want to align myself with companies who want to engage with me and have me be like really scrutinous of their processes. Like, I want you to open your doors and know that your processes are good enough that my scrutiny isn't going to scare you away.
Right.
And that's what we found. I'm choosing to take all this as a learning opportunity because I've ended bad relationships and I'm moving into new, more productive relationships.
Right.
When people are doing aerospace work, they're not afraid of what I'm doing.
Right.
And
It's
cool,
invited.
come on in,
Right.
bro. And it's like, give me your worst.
Right.
Because they've got solid processes and they're open to feedback to refine things for our specific needs. And that's what I've learned is not happening sometimes at other places. So, if that's a good enough service for you, cool. That's not aligned with my standards.
Right.
So, so we can go over here too. All these need to go back for a re-anneal. So those are pretty good to work with. I'm still weighing out, do I want to re-anneal them and harden them with these, but
Right.
I can work with those. But all of these have to go back for a re-anneal because they've got huge bowing to them and they're not right. So the only way to get that out of there, we're going to anneal them under a vacuum. We're going to bring them back to the shop. We're going to flatten them, make sure they're right, send them back out for a stress relieve, and re-harden them. So they're going to have the best damn heat treat they can have, which is why I kind of want to do the other ones, except that there's no profit in this. This is all expense to get this done.
Right.
But I want to give you guys the best. I want you to have exactly what I promised, and that's based on today's understanding. I know what I can do today. You guys are seeing it in the other knives, but it's going to take me a second.
Right.
You know, this isn't, they're not coming out of a 3D printer.
Right. And I think it's just hard for a lot of people to kind of understand the length of this issue. You know what I mean? As far as how it equates in time, money, and sacrifice from you.
Yeah,
it's very difficult.
Think we haven't been making changes along the way, but you don't get the kind of consistency we have up there that you were impressed with by having bad processes in here.
Right.
You know, you don't get the performance you see in the videos. People are genuinely happy because the knives are exactly what they should be. The steels act how they should be. You have a consistent product. That's where Sean down at Edgeworks loves our stuff.
Right.
It's a very nice product at a fair price, but I need to make sure everybody I'm working with has the same goals and has our best interest at heart.
Right.
You know, when things always go wrong,
right.
but it's how you act when those things go wrong.
Right.
You know, I could have just folded up shop a couple of years ago when it became inconvenient. Instead, we doubled down and got the rest of the equipment we needed. We learned how to do the best job possible with all these pieces of equipment.
And guys, when you're looking at total price and total package of what you're getting, you know, Guy and I had a bunch of knives in my bag from
He's got a lot of knives. He's not like a Survive fanboy. This guy's got a lot of knives. It's
so we and I'm not going to single out any companies. You guys know I like a lot of different companies, but you know, I was going through some of what these other knives cost and what you get as a whole package next to Guy's knives. It was just like a random conversation we were having when we were kind of getting to know each other. And it's funny because when you look at what you're paying and the total package you're receiving, even if there's a weight, that it's in a lot of cases it doesn't even come close. And it's, you know, it sometimes it's annoying to wait. I understand that. But you're waiting for a reason. It's, you know what I mean? The pre-orders are for a reason. The processes and extra checks and all these things that you do and high tolerances are for a reason.
It's not just slipping stuff out the door.
Right.
Because I don't care if it's a big or small knife, it should be consistent.
Right.
And we should have good standards no matter, I mean, this is rough grinding. And that's insane, especially with some of the stuff you showed me.
Right. I can see myself in it.
Yeah, we're doing a great job. And we know a lot about like the price of stuff, but I don't think people understand value. You know, you look at the cost and assume that it's worth that, but demonstrably it's not. Looking at some of those other tools, there's not the amount of work, the craftsmanship, just the precision of execution. And, you know, some of you guys can hate me out there, but I don't see complaints about our quality.
Right.
You know, and that's
and a lot of times it's a shame because some people that haven't liked your company or what's happened or not been a fan of your knives usually is because they haven't ever used one of your knives or gotten to experience one of them, because they are an experience almost more than a product.
It is, and I can say that dispassionately.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not into this at all, but I know what our standards are.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if I'm having a good or bad day. You know, the standard's a standard.
Yeah.
And we've got a great team in here. You know, it's only 4 of us, but we have a great team.
Yeah.
Sorry I'm blinding somebody there.
It's all right.
Yeah, man, thanks for stopping in the shop. You know, I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to look at, but like I said, we have an open shop. Anybody's always welcome to come in here. Another customer walked in. He just got an EDC4 and was happy to check out the shop. But I dare anybody to come in here and tell me what we're doing wrong or what we could have done better, except with the benefit of hindsight. Like, I kick myself every damn day, but that's because I learned all of this now and I can be really critical of my past decisions. But at the time, I made the best decisions I could with the information I had available to me, the knowledge I had. So I'm learning I've got to be all of the things so that I can hold everybody accountable. Yeah, so I've got to get into metallurgy. You know, now I've got several metallurgist friends who I can consult with, and I understand those things and what should and shouldn't be happening and who I need to work with so that the things are happening the way they should. And nobody's ever going to pull any bullshit on me anymore. Right.
And that's why I think one of the things I said to you, that's why it's exciting to see you are on the upswing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like I come in and try to get to know you and check out the shop and talk knives, and it's just a continual downslope of, you know, less, how do I say that? Lessening your quality to curve back. You know what I mean?
No, it's
you're
better
not
than ever.
You're not lessening
Yeah.
your processes or you
you
know.
just get used to being in the fire.
Right.
You know, it's like it's not going to burn me down. We just keep getting used to it. And
Right.
as this stuff falls off, these equipment payments are ending in a month, like it just keeps getting easier.
Right.
You know, we've learned how to do this, and now we've got good processes to finish this stuff out. We've learned what went wrong at other places, and we're just going to deal with it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm getting really comfortable with that saying. It just is what it is.
Right.
You know, that's where I'm at.
Yep. Well, thanks a lot, Guy. I appreciate
Yeah,
all the
of
info. I think a lot of people are going to, enjoy to see a little different side of the problem here. So,
Yeah, sorry this ended up being like a TV episode, but I think that's, for you guys who are really into the processes, not everybody's in this long format content, but this,
I'd rather have a little too much info than a little too little.
that's fair.
Yeah.
So thanks for stopping by, you guys, and we'll talk to you again soon.